Yes, things are finally ramping up out there in the Caribbean and Atlantic. We've got the appearance of Tropical Storm Laura out there with 40-knot winds, 1007 millibar pressure. Not a very strong storm, but it is heading towards the west-northwest there. And the track is shifted a little bit south, taking it more into the Gulf of Mexico. So this will probably have an impact on western Florida, possibly all the way out towards Louisiana. And NHC forecasting that to increase to hurricane strength by midweek next week. Also, Tropical Depression 14 out there. Not very well organized, but it is off the north coast of Honduras with 30-knot winds. There's the forecast track. They're expecting that to intensify into a tropical storm, possibly later today, making landfall in the Yucatan Saturday, then crossing over to the Gulf of Mexico Sunday into Monday. And it looks like briefly hurricane strength. If we look at the discussions, you can see that they're indicating that the shear is weak over the northwestern Caribbean. And then this is kind of the bone of contention here. Reintensification over the Gulf between days 2 and 3, while vertical shear remains relatively low. Well, I looked at the vertical shear, and this is thanks to Jeff Krob's wind grids, and we're looking at the Gfs Forecast here. This is how it looks right now, about noon. There's substantial shear across the Gulf at this time. That correlates pretty well with the GFS. We got that polar front jet all the way down almost to the Bay of Campeche there. And we'll just take a quick look at Saturday and Sunday. And yeah, the flow does kind of weaken a little bit, but we're still looking at about 30 to 35 knots there at 200 millibars. There's the 850 to 200 millibars shear on Saturday morning, 24-hour forecast. Still some pretty substantial shear across the central Gulf. By 48 hours on Sunday morning, this is about when the system is crossing the Yucatan, still looking at about 30 to 40 knot flow. Not very conducive to development, and let's see what it looks like for Monday. There's a 72-hour forecast. I don't know, still looks like substantial shear out ahead of it, so I'm just not really getting that part of the discussion. For Laura, though, yeah, things look favorable. Laura right there, this is the 24-hour forecast for Saturday morning, and we see that large area of weak shear out ahead of it. There's Sunday morning. Out ahead of it, some weak shear. So all of this is favorable for some slow intensification of that storm. And these are new graphics that we've added, and to my knowledge, you can't get this anywhere on the internet. So there you go. There's some forecast tools for you. And looking at Sunday for the 72-hour forecast, there you go. So yeah, this is going to be influenced somewhat by the storm circulation. So the important thing is to look out ahead of it and around it, rather than right in the center. It is tricky using that shear product. So for something different, there's the 850 to 400 millibar shear. This is 5,000 up to about 25,000 feet. It's a shallower layer, and weaker systems may be more keyed in on these shallow layers. So this is how it looks today, and then going forward into tomorrow morning. There's a 24-hour forecast. There's the 48-hour forecast. So yeah, I guess if you go through a shallower layer, the shear does look a little bit better. And if we go up to 300 millibars, we do pick up a little bit more shear there. But I guess it really depends on how deep of a layer you're going to work with. There's the latest tracks on that storm. If we just go by the center, that's taking it pretty much into the Houston-Beaumont area. And then that's a pretty wide cone there of possible outcomes. What we have down here are some of the GFS and Canadian Ensemble members. And what we have up here is the NavGem and the HWRF. And there's the range of solutions for Tropical Storm Laura. Looks like, yeah, things are pretty much bunched up right along the North Cuban coast. And here it seems like we have a similar situation with the NavGem and the HWRF going a little bit more northerly And then down here we have the HMON and the UK Met forming a lot of those southerly tracks there. But we can see the median solution pretty much right up there towards Mobile, Biloxi, and New Orleans. And just for the record, here's the variable consensus models, the TVCA, TVCN, all that from INSEP there for LoRa. And let's check out the consensus for 14. So there's the track variable consensus model for 14, bringing it into the Lake Charles area at this time. That's the way it looks. We'll have an update on Sunday or Monday for the Patreon supporters. So if you want to get in on that, head to our Patreon. We'll have that link at the end of the video. So yeah, it does look like an active period coming up in the Gulf in the week ahead. But let's see what's happening today. We'll run this back to yesterday and see how the convection looked about 24 hours ago. Very active there in the southeastern U.S., and that's due to that deep trough in the Gulf, sending strong winds aloft and helping to organize and prolong the cells that we have in the southeast. Not all of that convection shut down overnight. A lot of it kept going over Georgia all the way into the morning hours, and then you see a lot of it spreading into the Carolinas there and up into Tennessee, where it's been kind of a rainy day. Also some more cells down there in Florida. Very weak northwesterly flow convection in Oklahoma. That's expected to die out today. And elsewhere, looks pretty quiet from California all the way to New York. But California is still dealing with wildfires, not as much in the San Francisco area, but up in the northern valleys towards Red Bluff. They've got quite a few of them going. There's a Northern California Wildfire Center there showing the fire clusters. And there you can see the impacts on ceiling and visibility, with lots of stations down to 2 miles in haze and smoke. Got 1 mile there just west of Lake Tahoe, and in San Francisco Bay Area about 4 miles is the rule. And another interesting finding, you can see that smoke corridor pretty much going all the way into Utah and into Wyoming. Going around to the Denver sector, yep, smoke all the way into that area due to that anticyclonic clockwise flow around that subtropical high. Yeah, we need to still look at that there. It looks like even Laramie getting a little bit of that smoke and haze showing up there. And just looking at this frame here from the Central Plains, that's pretty clear evidence of smoke all the way into southwest Kansas, and I wouldn't be surprised if it showed up in North Texas and western Oklahoma. There's our upper air chart, 250 millibars, about 34,000 feet, showing the jet stream energy coming in from the Pacific onto the coast around Quileute, Seattle, Vancouver, and then rounding the bend there in Montana all the way down into Texas, showing up there on the Norman and Fort Worth soundings. 70 knots there at Fort Worth, and we can even see some of that energy all the way to Brownsville, which is very unusual for August. And we've got that very deep trough there. It extends all the way from Illinois down to the Gulf, and out ahead of it, there's the other side of the jet, energy coming up out of the Gulf and into the East Coast area. And with that strong flow, that's what's helping to organize the storms there in the southeast. You got that abundant moisture with strong winds aloft. You increase the bulk shears. That's a good recipe there for convection. The subtropical high, where's that? Looks like that's backed off a little bit, now located just south of Arizona. So it's taken that little track down south like that. Now, one thing that's pretty interesting about this anticyclonic flow is anything from California to Nevada is being carried into the central U.S. And we're not just talking about smoke, but also balloons. This is a service called FlightAware, and what you'll notice is superimposed with the airplanes are these little balloon shapes, and there's a lot of them in Texas. See, there's a little cluster right there that's coming from the launch site at Winnemucca there. Another balloon near Carlsbad making it south. I'm not sure exactly what their strategy is, but I think they're trying to take advantage of this big ridge somehow to inject balloons southward into the tropics. Now we got this other balloon that's moved into North Texas. Here's a look at it. This is some video I took a couple hours ago. And it shows one of these balloons up at 56,000 feet. Certainly visible from the ground. And just wandering northwest at about 10 to 15 knots. So if you're in the Dallas area, you may see that off to the south this evening. And there should be another balloon visible just northeast of Phoenix this evening. Here's our mid-afternoon conditions in the southwestern U.S. Heat lows still in place in the southern New Mexico deserts there, all the way to Pecos and Odessa. Very warm temperatures in that area, helping to keep the pressures on the low side. 100 degrees there at Deming. And as we move to the west, we see one thing that has changed from yesterday, and that's the introduction of high dew points. 61 degree dew point there at Phoenix, 60 at Tucson. So the monsoon is returning a little bit there, and we see around the Salton Sea area 75 degree dew points. It looks like we've had some pretty good advection of the Gulf of California moisture inland. So that could be a recipe for thunderstorms in the California deserts there. And then up north, of course, we do see the smoke from those wildfires across Reno up to Winnemucca and out to Salt Lake. And then the dry line looks like that's established there in the high plains. Another feature that we find is what looks like a very weak front lifting north through Texas. So we're likely going to see the wind shift to the south temporarily across Texas until that tropical cyclone action starts increasing the northerly component. And there's our latest satellite loop. Yeah, it looks like a little bit of monsoon activity getting started all the way back towards, I don't know, wherever that is, just east of San Diego. And then, of course, up on the higher terrain of the Four Corners, some storms starting to get going in that area also. And there's a look at that activity there. The storms forming on the higher terrain there, the mountains east of Riverside. Ron Chalfant is not too far away from this stuff, so maybe he'll give us a little report what's happening. So yeah, those are being fed by that good moisture heading upslope and getting into that higher terrain. Not much going on in the northwestern U.S. It looks like maybe the marine layer has come into the Portland, Seattle area. But pretty much clear skies all the way to Bismarck. And we see some evidence of some high-based thunderstorm activity in the eastern part of the state. A little new convection there around Grand Forks. And there's the surface map. Mostly high pressure. Looks like a cyclone well up to the north of Victoria Island. And then a frontal system in the Canadian prairies, producing some storms there. The part affecting North Dakota, that appears to be that good moisture, working its way northward. We got 60s and 70s dew points in Minnesota, and we've got that little wedge coming up all the way into Manitoba and Saskatchewan. This is 70s dew points. So you see how that forms a wedge there. Then you get that lift along the front. So a lot of ingredients up in this area here favorable for thunderstorms. The question is, how deep is that moisture? If it's not deep enough, you're going to get a lot of elevated activity. Not much going on in the northeast U.S. Very, very broad area of high pressure, just washing out. The center of that looks like that's moving offshore, and that's returning most of the Midwest and eastern U.S. to southerly flow. However, there still is a new area of cold air coming south. Another shot coming into the northeast U.S. Not enough to provide much relief around Portland and Boston. Still got 86 to 90 degrees there, and even 92 at Albany. Very hot in that area, and the relief just up to the north. And there's the satellite loop. You can just about trace out exactly where that front is. That looks like it right there. Definite change in cloud textures. We go from this spotty cumulus with a little bit of cirrus to scattered to overcast cumulus and altocumulus layers. Down to the south, we see the approach of some baroclinicity. That looks like a lot more than just convective debris. That looks like some dynamic lift coming up from the south. And indeed, we do have that jet coming up from the Gulf of Mexico into the southeast U.S. And there it is, and you can certainly see some evidence of a comet cloud. See that right there? So yeah, I think there's some baroclinicity there for sure. Not showing up very much on the surface charts, but in the mid-levels, like we showed you yesterday, you can definitely pick that out. So, and then the satellite loops, yeah, we do see a little bit of turning there. Could be some localized circulations, some mesoscale convective vortices. And it looks like there's probably some outflow boundaries. So let's see how that stacks up on the surface chart. I don't know. I suspect it could be looking a little bit like that. Pattern's very weak, but looks like an outflow pool there north of Tampa, and then maybe some evidence of maybe a very weak occlusion over Alabama. The air across that region is kind of worked over, and not many surface observations offshore, so it is kind of hard to put together what's happening. But in Texas, yeah, you can see that frontal boundary there. So that'll do it for our Friday edition. Thank you for watching, and thank you very much to our generous supporters. Take care, and we will see you Sunday or Monday for the supporters, and Tuesday for everybody else. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.